The MiG-23M caught a lot of bad press when it was first released in Update Red Skies, but with the addition of R-60Ms and enough time passed for it to settle into the meta, I think it's a good time to take another look at how the Russian interceptor stacks up against the competition.
Somebody attack him!
In the early 1960s, 5 main design requirements for what would become the MiG-23 were put forward. These were 1. An increased low-level speed, 2. Improved pilot comfort during high-speed, low-level rides, 3. Considerably increased range, 4. A huge advance in the takeoff and landing performance to allow the use of shorter runways, 5. The integration of a powerful weapons control system with the ability to use BVR missiles. This last point was considered essential for the air superiority role in the 1970s, as both the F-4 and the Mirage F-1 were viewed as the main opponents for this future fighter. With these design specifications in mind, the McCoy and Gurevich Design Bureau put forward 2 prototypes in 1965. The first was designated 23-01 and the second was designated 23-11. 23-01 was a short takeoff and landing aircraft that featured a pair of lift jets in the center of the aircraft to improve takeoff and landing performance. However, after 14 test flights, the project was cancelled, ironically due to the lift jets causing instability during takeoff and landings. 2311 incorporated a variable geometry wing design to achieve the desired low-speed handling. The wing had 3 main sweep settings manually set by the pilot. These were 16 degrees, 45 degrees, and 72 degrees. The first setting was used for takeoff, landing, and cruising up to Mach 0.7. The second setting was used for high-speed cruising and basic fighter maneuvering. And the third setting was used for high-speed dashes and low and high-level intercepts. This second prototype would make it through trials and was accepted by the Soviet Air Force in 1969. The first 2 MiG-23 variants, the MiG-23S and the MiG-23 1971 edition, would see limited production and were mainly used to further refine the airframe. The MiG-23M that we see in-game is the definitive first-generation flogger. This variant would be produced between 1972 and 1975 before being replaced by the MiG-23 ML. It would quickly become the primary fighter of the Soviet BVS and saw export to other Warsaw Pact nations and third world countries aligned with the Soviet Union. The MiG-23M is equipped with a Sapphire 23D pulse radar and the TP-23 IRST system, making it a credible look-down, shoot-down threat. In-game, the MiG-23 has one of the better radars at top tier. The radar has 3 separate modes, a regular search mode that'll be familiar to most players at this point, and then 2 modes that are unique to the MiG-23. These modes are the LD, look down, and MTI, moving target indication modes. Your plane will switch between these 2 based on your current altitude. MTI will be active between ground level and 5,500 to 6,500 feet, and will switch to look down mode after passing that altitude. The MTI mode filters out all ground clutter, ignores chaff, but is prone to notching, similar to the PD mode on the F-4 EJ Kai and the Viggen. Look-down mode does not remove ground clutter, but it significantly reduces clutter on the radar screen. It is also immune to notching, but is prone to chaff, though if you fire your missile before they deploy chaff, it doesn't matter. For a more in-depth look at using radar, check out my Fox 1 tutorial. The TP-23 IRST allows you to slave IR missiles onto a plane without alerting the enemy's RWR. One of the biggest downfalls of the radar on the MiG-23 is that it lacks an ACM mode. This makes it difficult to acquire a radar lock while in a dogfight. Thankfully, the IRST can cover this fault as it has a much easier time locking a target in a turn fight compared to the radar, allowing you to slave your R-60s or R-23Ts onto your target. The MiG-23M is also equipped with a standard Soviet-style RWR. These are different from NATO RWRs as they don't show the exact direction you are being locked from. Instead, they will light up in each corner depending on the direction you are being locked from. Though all these avionics are useless without weapons. The MiG-23M gets several missiles for air-to-air, as well as unguided bombs, rockets, and guided air-to-ground missiles for ground attack. Stock, you only get two 10G R3Ss, so I suggest going for the first bomb load so you can bomb bases to grind the required RP for the next missiles. Thankfully, you get a pretty good missile in the R13M1 at Tier 2. This is a 20G missile with good range and flare resistance. The downside being you are unable to slave this missile to either your radar or your IRST. After the R13, you get the new R60M. This is an all-aspect version of the old R60. You get the same 30G R60 missile that you're used to, but with a 1.25 mile all-aspect lock range. This allows you to lock targets in the front quarter, though you have a small window to fire them, so you will need to warm the missile up beforehand if you're going for a head-on. The final missile you can unlock is the R23. This comes in two versions, the R23R and the R23T. Both are 15G Mach 3 capable missiles with a massive 20 kilogram warhead. If this hits something, they're not going to be making it home. The R23R is a semi-active radar homing missile with a max range of 16 3/4 miles, though in actual games, the practical range of these missiles is between 6 to 9 miles depending on your altitude and your relative speeds with your target. Since these are only 15G missiles, you will have trouble killing maneuvering targets, but if you use these missiles to force your opponent onto the defensive, you can come in with the R60Ms and secure easy kills. The R23T is an all-aspect IR version that gets a 1.4 mile all-aspect lock range. You can fire them in a head-on, but like the R60s, they have a limited window. However, unlike the R60s, they have a harder time hitting a maneuvering target since they can only pull 15G. The only real advantage the R23Ts have over the R60Ms is the increased range that allows you to get 2 to 3 mile rear aspect shots. The choice is up to you on what you want to use, but personally I have stopped using the R23T after direct hit dropped. MiG-23M has drastically different flight characteristics compared to the previous MiG-21s in the tech tree, but it is still an interceptor. At the heart of the MiG-23M's performance is the massive Tumansky R29-300 turbojet, able to provide 7,950 kilograms dry and a whopping 10,490 kilograms of force in afterburner. This engine, combined with the overall heavier airframe of the MiG-23, gives it excellent energy retention over its predecessors. The MiG-23 also has a much improved rip speed compared to the MiG-21 BIS. Where the BIS would rip its wings at around 736 knots on the deck, the MiG-23 can reach up to 792 knots before ripping its wings, allowing you to run down fast opponents or run away from multiple pursuers. One place the 23 falls short though is in its flare count. You only get 12 flares, giving you 1 or 2 missile dodges before running out. It is best to position yourself so as not to get shot by a missile. This means avoiding furballs and instead making high-speed slashing attacks at distracted enemies, giving them little time to react and turn onto you to get a missile shot off. This doesn't mean you can't get into a turning dogfight in the MiG-23. You just want to choose these fights to limit the number of missiles being shot at you. Avoid giant furballs and only commit to 1v1s or 2v2s, or fights where you have a clear numbers advantage. Once Get into a dogfight, there are several advantages you have depending on your opponent. If you take manual control of the wing sweep, you can turn the MiG-23 into one of the best rate fighting jets in the game by keeping your speed between 350 and 400 knots and putting your wings full forward. Only the F-5E really has a chance of beating you in a rate fight. Be warned though, this type of fight can take a while, so it's best utilized in 1v1s where you are far away from other enemies so as not to get interrupted and have a missile shoved up your butt. Against Phantoms, you can match them in one circle, but if you start to lose, transition into a rate fight and the Phantom won't be able to keep up with you. Delta-wing aircraft like the Viggen, Mirage, and German and Chinese MiG-21s will be able to beat you in a one circle pretty handily, but their poor energy retention down low leaves them vulnerable to being outrated by the MiG-23. My typical flight envelope for the MiG-23M is to take off and begin side climbing at 20 degrees. I set my wings back to 50% while I climb, and upon reaching 20,000 feet, I will level off and set my wings full back. I'll then set my radar to look down mode, and using both my radar and my Mark 1 eyeballs, I'll look for dots off in the distance. Once I find a good target, I will lock it up and launch an R-23R at 6 to 7 miles, possibly further depending on my speed and our relative altitudes. Afterwards, I will begin to prep an R-60M as I continue to close. If the R-23R misses, I'll launch an R-60M as soon as I get a good tone and then begin evading bullets that are most likely headed my way. After the high altitude fights are over, I'll look for anyone below me that is either an easy target or a friendly that needs help. And from there, it's just making high-speed slashing attacks with R-60s and occasionally getting into some dogfights. So, wrapping up with some pros and cons and then my final verdict. The MiG-23M has a wide selection of very good missiles ranging from all-aspect IR missiles to a respectable semi-active radar homing missile. The MiG-23M is one of the fastest planes in the game and has good energy retention, allowing it to excel in the rate fight. The MiG-23M comes with good radar, allowing for look-down, shoot-down BVR engagements, as well as sneak attacks when using the IRST in conjunction with one of your slavable IR missiles. As for cons, though the MiG-23 can compete in the 1v1 dogfight, it'll get torn to shreds if you take it into a furball. This plane does not fit the conventional turn and burn furball meta that top tier usually descends into, so you need to know that and play it accordingly. Even though you have countermeasures, you don't get very many, so you need to fly like you don't have any of them at all, and you tend to be fine that way. Being an end-of-the-line vehicle, the RP costs for the modifications are really high. Add to that the terrible stock weapons, and you're in for one tough grind. But once you get to the R13M ones, this will start to ease out a bit. My final verdict is that the MiG-23M provides you with all the tools you will need to tackle any situation you may run up against in top tier. At that point, it's up to the pilot to learn how best to use these tools effectively. It'll take some time to learn, but once you do, the MiG-23M is one of the best jets in the game. If you're looking to grind the Soviet era tech tree, the MiG-23M is well worth the grind. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you all around later.